It's an Archaeodeath Interview with Professor Howard Williams and his guest. Okay, hello everybody and welcome to the latest Archaeodeath Interview, and we've got another great special guest today to discuss all things deathly and the ethics of bioarchaeology. It's Dr Kirsty Squires. So hello Kirsty.
Hi Howard, how are you?
I'm all right, hanging in there as they say, or I just said, anyway, someone said. And so, in other words, no, I'm not hanging in anywhere. I'm hanging off something. But anyway, the main thing is we're here, and I hope to put this out as a good context for us to chat on some things we have in common as mortuary archaeologists, but also some many strings to your bow of specialists areas that you've been exploring in your research. So I wondered if you could start off, Kirsty, by giving us an introduction to who you are and what do you do?
Yes, I am a senior lecturer in forensic anthropology at Staffordshire University in the UK, and I am a bioarchaeologist as well. So I particularly specialise in the analysis and interpretation of cremated remains, mortuary archaeology. I knew you'd like that, Howard.
I do. I like things burned.
And I also explore the archaeology of childhood in the UK and also in Sicily. In terms of my teaching, I principally teach forensic anthropology, so introduction to forensic anthropology, so learning about skeletal anatomy, constructing biological profiles and how that's useful in forensic cases. I also teach statistical methods, ethics, aspects of archaeology, disaster victim identification, forensic odontology and podiatry. So they're the main areas that I teach on the awards, and I'm also an award leader for the MSc Forensic Science course and the MSc Digital Forensic Investigation, which started this academic year. So all very exciting.
Oh, so you're the person to go to do anything forensics. That's the plug, everyone. Go. Type Kirsty and forensics, and do that course. No, but seriously, I mean, it's an interesting contrast of us because I sit in the history and archaeology department teaching archaeology. You're not really teaching archaeology in an archaeology unit at all, but this shows the versatility of our our field, isn't it? We look at the present, past. It's lots of fun stuff.
Definitely, and a lot of the techniques that we use, so for example, especially field work, techniques that we employ can be used, with police. So I teach policing students as well as forensic students about surveying methods, search methods, etc. So it is all interlinked, and the methods can be used across different disciplines, which I think is fantastic.
And in many ways, it's also an example to say that there are many of us all working in small units in universities, as well as the big archaeology departments, which perhaps we were trained at, and perhaps because you were a postgrad or an undergrad and postgrad at Sheffield University, weren't you, Kirsty?
I did my undergrad at Nottingham University, and I did my MSc in human osteology and funerary archaeology at Sheffield, and I did my PhD there as well.
That's right. I was an undergrad at Sheffield, then jumped down to Reading. But my point is that we're the kind of people that you'll find sort of in our own little niches in other universities, sort of not working on our own, but working in different groupings, as well as the archaeologists that perhaps people know about most because they're in a bigger unit. But we're doing our thing, and it's really good fun. And I think, and it sounds like you're sort of contributing to so many exciting programs. And what I wanted to ask particularly in today's conversation, because we may have another chance to chat about other things in future, because amongst that rich range, I wanted to ask you about your latest brand new edited collection, which is a huge tome that's come out with Springer, and it's called Ethical Approaches to Human Remains, a global challenge in bioarchaeology and forensic anthropology. And I think that it's one of these examples where the subtitle is really important because it does have a global reach. I wonder if you could tell me something about that book.
Yeah, well, I first had the idea about the book when I was asked to deliver a session on ethics in my field of research. So I was looking for different pieces of research, and there are collections, there are books, there are journal articles, but they were kind of scattered around in different journals. And I thought, there's no real up-to-date, comprehensive volume that's bringing together, like current challenges. So I'd also experienced some, I had witnessed some quite poor ethical practice, and it got me a bit fired up. So I thought, right, I'm going to, put a volume together. So I approached David Erickson about it, and he, was really enthusiastic. And then we approached Nick Marquez Grant, and he was equally excited. So that's how it all started. And then we approached, the many contributors around the world to write chapters for the volume.
So it was an idea that was inspired by personal experience of in the forensic or the archaeology or a bit of both. Maybe you don't want to divulge the details. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's both. So it was my experience, like the module I was teaching, it was cross school. It's quite a unique module. So I was teaching students from psychology and, all these different areas. And I had to talk about ethical challenges within like bioarchaeology and forensic anthropology in terms of like teaching and research. So I wanted to find different cases and, just to like the theory and so on. But I just struggled in terms of like the literature, the stuff out there, but nothing too up to date. But yeah, in terms of poor ethical practice, it was like mainly field work related.
Right, okay, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I should.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah.
And tell me a bit about Dave. I've never met David. I've been in touch with David, but I don't know Nick. So how did they come together? Did you meet at conferences? Do you know if you worked on projects before, or is this because it's a big commitment to work with two other people on an edited book? I'm just interested in how that worked.
Yeah, I had met Dave a few years prior to when we started the book, and we met, I think, at a conference in Bradford. I can't remember, it was the day conference, and we were working on various bits and pieces, and then I met Nick through Dave. So Dave at the time was at Teesside University, and Nick was at Cranfield, and now Dave's at Cranfield as well.
Of course, yes, right. So they're all in the same place now. Yeah. Okay, that's good. So, and how many years did it take to pull this together? Because, I mean, edited books are massive undertakings. I don't think anyone appreciates it. I've got a bit of a chip on my shoulder about this. I don't think, because people just go, oh, it took a year for my particle to come out. And I go, do you realise what it, But, I assume you're not going to tell me it took 2 months to get this together. It's longer, yeah?
It took a lot longer. So I think we put the proposal in 2016, and it was published. It has a 2019 date, but it came out on like it was the 31st of December 2019, I believe, because I was in the States at the time, and I didn't realise until I checked my email. So a bit of a surprise. So yeah, it took about 3 years to pull together.
I mean, that is pretty quick, actually. I think, given the scale of the book, that is amazing. So well done for that. And so what kind of range does it cover, the book? What kind of things? How is it structured, and what kind of stuff is in it?
Oh gosh, it's very broad. So one of the great things about the book is that we have specialists from a lot of different areas. So not just bioarchaeologists and forensic anthropologists. There's philosophers, sociologists, we've got field archaeologists, historians, museum curators. So, a huge range of different perspectives. So initially, like the philosophy of ethics is explored. And then the book moves on to explore some more general areas. So, for example, ethical challenges in fieldwork, for example, in teaching, for example, universities and higher education establishments, destructive sampling. We also brought in chapters exploring some of the more recent issues, so to speak. So, for example, 3D data. Yeah, 3D data.
Yeah.
Social media. So they hadn't really been explored before, so that was really exciting. And then, the use of human taphonomy facilities. So some people will know them as body farms. as well as the trade of human remains. And then the second part of the book focuses on specific case studies. So, for example, different countries, different contexts around the world. And it was really hard because we could have had so many in, different chapters in this section. So we did have to be quite restrained in terms of how many we included. And then there's some like concluding remarks at the end with some recommendations for future practice, and there's also recommendations in a number of chapters as well, which I think is really useful, especially the first half of the book where like the destructive sampling chapter, for example. So I wrote that with Tom Booth and Charlotte Roberts, and we make recommendations for best practice in terms of destructive sampling.
So, I mean, I was going to ask, did you appear anywhere else, or is it the intro and the non-destructive chapters?
Yeah, and I co-authored a chapter with one of my PhD students, Keith Silica, on the chapter on Zimbabwe. So my contribution to that was the archaeology and anthropology side of things, and also the concluding remarks chapter as well.
That's right. Okay, yes, because I knew you cropped up in other places. So you've really got a sort of sense of the sort of you've got the finger on the pulse in relation to this book. Although of course you admit there's things that you could always have added. I mean, what kind of things do you think are the big takeaway points for the future, do you think, from your perspective, that the book sort of maybe you thought would come up, or you were surprised came up as connecting things?
I'm not sure. I think that I didn't quite expect the book to be as big as it as it turned out to be. It was only supposed to be about a maximum of about 300 pages, and it's over 600 pages. So yeah, we got a bit carried away, but I think it's just highlighted how the number of challenges that we actually face in our work, and the fact that we really need to do more. So there are loads and loads of discussions around ethics, conferences, and it's just the fact that we need to ensure that these are actioned. And we're seeing this more and more with different organizations like Babia are doing a great job at the moment. They're always updating their website and their code of ethics, which is good.
Sorry, what was it again? The British Archaeology? No, I can't remember. Sorry, what's the?
It's the British Association for Biological Anthropology and Osteoarchaeology.
Sorry, I thought, for people who don't know, but I couldn't remember, so I thought I'd better ask.
So yeah, on their website they have the code of ethics and code of practice. So it's kind of like many of the other big societies and organizations, they have the code of ethics online. But some of them they do need updating, and there are still gaps in there, and they are working towards it. So I feel that there just needs to be a bit of a push in terms of speeding it up a little bit, and I think just collaborating, so more collaboration is really going to help with that.
And do you feel there are, on reflection, you may not want to, are there things that you thought were going to be addressed by the book that ended up not being the issues you thought they were going to be? Does that make sense? Are there things that didn't rise up to the fore that you think maybe,
Not quite. I mean, I think the emphasis really is bioarchaeology, so there isn't a great deal on forensic anthropology in the book. So I think if there's like a second edition, or if it was to do something again, maybe a bit more forensic anthropology. But I think in a way it was good, because around the same time an ethics book on forensic anthropology came out. So it was like it was well timed, and I think the range of papers that we had, it worked well.
I mean, do you find that some people are more reticent to address these rather controversial issues, or did you not find that a challenge? With
yes.
some disciplines having differences, I meant, in terms of their ability to, their confidence to talk about this.
I think so. I think it's becoming a lot easier and better in bioarchaeology. It is still quite difficult, and just just actioning, you know, some of like the recommendations. Like, for example, one of the big things that I really want to push is in journals, for example, where destructive sampling has been conducted, and you know, it's problematic because you're destroying bone, so it's affecting the preservation of a collection ultimately. And there's no record in many cases that ethical approval has been sought in the journal articles. So, for example, in medical journals, you have to note that. But in many bioarchaeology papers, this isn't noted, and journals don't, you know, publish it. So in my most recent journal articles that I published where I have used bone, I always include just a sentence. And I think, you know, this is something that could be easily addressed by, you know, the journals, the editors. So I think it is just, you know, everyone just pushing for it, making sure that they are even just making a note of it in like their methodology, just to state that ethical approval was sought. And the more we do this, I think the better it will be and more transparent.
Because I've certainly seen, I'm sure there's more than I'm aware of, but I've certainly seen some big controversies in which some of the authors in this book have contributed to correct in recent years, of the kind of severity that you would, some of it's to do with new methods and techniques, okay, but some of it is to do with things that are, you would have thought we would have, to use a terrible pun, you know, would be dead and buried, would be long, you know, past our concerns. And I mean, do you think are the major motives or causes of bad ethical practice? Is it just pressures or ignorance, or is it is there something else going on, you know, behind it all?
I think there are many factors, and I think the Lovelace and Linton chapter addresses it really well. Here, you know, there are some absolutely appalling practices, and basically around Native American, excuse me, remains, and scientists thinking that they have, you know, the right to study them. They won't repatriate, for example. And it's selfishness. It's not acceptable. And, you know, I mean, in the, you know, on social media, in the news, we've seen over the past few weeks, there's been issues in terms of bioarchaeologists not, you know, really being respectful to other religious groups, for example. And, you know, it's just that's, I think some bioarchaeologists, they are in the minority, I will say, is the minority that think that they should have the right to study any human remains regardless, and, you know, religion or, you know, beliefs is not important. And, you know, we have to, you know, respect other people's beliefs, and I think we need to be teaching this at undergraduate level, you know, within archaeology, within bioarchaeology, because you can't be good bioarchaeologist if you're not compassionate, you don't understand and, you know, or try to understand you know, other people's belief system. It's just part of the job. So I think, you know, it's to do with selfishness, the fact that individuals want to publish, they want to get funding, and yeah, I think that's ultimately probably the main reasons.
We all have personal individual attitudes and opinions, and where they blur in, you know, we make mistakes, don't we? But there has to be a degree where, as a collective, and when we make errors, that there's some kind of rectification or some kind of process that you know, allows us. Particularly the Native American thing is so well established. It does beg a belief when I've seen some recent social media commentaries about it, and I mean, as much as I don't like a pylon, sometimes I see these things and I think, like, it can't be the way it is. Yeah, it is. That's what happened. You know, I'm very skeptical. I just go, you know, no. She or he wouldn't have done that. They haven't got a session on this. They haven't, you know, they have, you know, and it is weird, isn't it? It's 2021. It always throws up exciting fun, just like 2020 did. I thought you've put a lot of effort into avoiding a North American and a UK bias. And I think you've achieved that, both when I've looked at individual chapters, but also there's multiple US chapters. But is it fair to say that there has been a heavy Anglo-American bias in these discussions before?
Yeah, certainly. And I was a bit concerned that, you know, the book was going to end up like that, but we managed to get, you know, really nice broad range of authors from around the world. And I think that in the past, like you said, yes, I do think that it has been, you know, focused in like the UK, North America, for example, and it's often, you know, white academics that, you know, we're not engaging with like native communities, religious groups, etc. And this is a problem, and we need to understand, you know, ethical challenges around the world, not just North America, not just the UK. We need to know what else is going on. If we are, you know, if we have shared challenges, if there are different challenges in other parts of the world that we might not be aware of, or they may have, you know, solutions that we can employ in our own work. So yeah, I did want to have, you know, quite a rounded global approach to this project.
Certainly sets up as a model for the massive inevitable gaps that could be filled on that global stage. Is there any other key points you'd like to pull out, Kirsty? You've learnt about that, you know, areas that perhaps were new to you as an editor. You got to learn about that you want to sort of tell viewers about the book.
Yeah, I think aspects around like 3D data, for example, I didn't really know much about that. You know, I'm not very tech savvy, so that was really interesting to learn more about that. And, you know, ethical concerns around the storage of 3D data. So, you know, scanning for the skeletal remains is all well and good, but how do we store that data ethically? How do we curate it? You know, it's a minefield when you get into it. So I found that very interesting. I also found I found the entire book interesting, to be honest. I'm not biased, but, you know.
Yes.
But I found, you know, I just learned something new in every single chapter. So I've, you know, the human taphonomy facility, you know, looking at different approaches. The commercial archaeology chapter by Louise Lohr and Sharon Clough. I thought that was a nice approach because, you know, we don't really think about ethical challenges within the commercial field unless, you know, you're working in it. But it did raise some really important points, and the case studies that they used were really interesting. I hadn't come across them before, so I found that fascinating. I also, you know, really enjoyed reading you know, the multitude of case studies from around the world, and indeed it's led to me collaborating with Rosia, who wrote the Argentina chapter, and we have an ethics paper coming out. It's in Spanish, and then I translated it from Spanish to English, so it's coming out in June, and that focuses in a lot more detail on ethical challenges in the 21st century, mainly in Argentina, but we explore other countries as well.
And working back into your own practice, do you think that by editing you've served the community? Editing is a role one takes on, a mantle one of serving others, serving the authors, and therefore serving a readership. But has it changed you in any way, do you think, in terms of what you're going to be doing moving forward in terms of teaching or research? Or
I think I'm even more aware of ethical issues. It's really opened my eyes to ethics and the way in which you know, I teach, the way that the collections are held at the university, for example, just everything. So it has had a profound impact on me as a professional, and, you know, I'm hoping to, you know, continue my research within this area. I'm doing well. I'm not going to say anything yet, but there will be something coming out shortly. So I am going to keep the ball rolling with this, and hopefully develop, you know, even more collaborations that you know, we can publish on. So yeah.
do you find this is the way you work best, or is it just one aspect of what you do? How does collaboration work for you moving in your research?
I find it really helpful, and I think with you know, some of my research I tend to work solo. So like my early medieval work, for example, and some of the archaeology of childhood I do work alone. So, for example, the medieval and the 19th century material. But I just find it more productive. I think that it's really beneficial because you learn different perspectives, and you get a more rounded understanding of an area, and I think it benefits the paper as well, rather than just having one viewpoint. Having multiple viewpoints and contributors, it really strengthens the paper. So I really enjoy working with other people on these pieces.
Has there anything you've learned from this process of researching on this book and that makes you think I would do that differently about my own research, looking back to your own past?
Yeah, definitely. So I think like with my destructive sampling, because I wasn't aware of like ethics forms until I moved to a forensics department where they were really hot on that. And I just didn't, when I was like a PhD student, for example, I just wasn't really aware of ethical challenges. So when I learned collections and when I had to sample, I obviously had to complete lots of paperwork for the museum, so that we could borrow the collection and conduct analyses and so on. But I hadn't really thought about ethics and addressing it in my research. So there's like no mention of it in like my first paper, my first collaborative paper, my PhD. And I look back and I think, oh my gosh, I can't believe that I didn't address ethics anywhere. And I think that's why it's so important that we embed, a module on ethics within like undergraduate programs and master's programs as well, so that students are aware of this. And it took me a few years to reading around the subject to really get a good understanding of it.
I mean, I'm fascinated and I'm still learning about issues about museum display and the writing about human past populations and working also with recent societies, but I'm not dealing with living subjects, but still there's an ethical responsibility when looking at gravestones and so on. But there's so many of these other areas, I confess, I feel very unsure, and like issues of storage and collections, and as you say, the digital world is bewildering. There's so many different issues there. One thing we haven't addressed so far, of course, is that we've had a separate interview for a book you're going to be in, Kirsty, where we're actually the product is going to be by interview. So we've talked about it elsewhere, but you're in a book that Femke Lippock are putting together on early medieval cremation practices, because you are one of the gurus of early medieval cremation. So I mean, we have to, even though this interview's been mainly about ethics in a global context, I mean, tell us a little bit about your early medieval cremation research.
So I started my research into cremation burials when I was doing my master's degree at the University of Sheffield. So I was looking at the Elsham Cemetery, so I looked at 300 burials. And then for my PhD, I expanded upon that and I analysed all the Elsham assemblage and all the Cleetham assemblage. So that's over 1,500 cremation burials. So I was really interested in understanding the demography of these sites, the identity of the deceased, as well as prior technologies. So I thought it was really important to study these sites because cremation, when I did my PhD, not many people were really analysing burnt bone. There was like Jackie McKinley, there was Holger Sikowski and Tim Thompson, but otherwise, it was not many people. So by analysing the Elsham and Cleetham assemblages, we've almost doubled the amount of information we have in terms of demographic profiles, identity, etc. So it's just really exciting. Lots more people are doing research in this area. So yeah.
And that's across periods, but specifically in the early Middle Ages, this book is going to hopefully pull together, perspectives from all over Northwest Europe, and your perspectives are going to be at half what you've achieved, but then also your vision of what we should be doing next, and that's going to be really exciting. So thank you for so much for being involved with that project. But And I would say, do you know what? I think that anyone who does cremation is kind of ethically pure, because cremation is such a neglected resource. I'm joking, it's not ethically pure. It is. There is an ethical issue there, that all of our narratives have been so skewed towards inhumation, unburned bodies, that anyone that's sort of pioneering in that field, I think, has a extra gold star, Kirsty. So I'm giving out gold stars now. I've just decided this. Everyone, we're giving out gold stars now for cremation research. Silver stars for anything else, gold stars for cremation.
Yeah.
And it's an interesting point that there's sort of, it's almost an ethical issue of like which collections we even focus our attention on, and making sure we're not just going for the ones that are going to guarantee results that allow us an easy win. And I think that's something that is going to be really important moving forward, for hopefully encourages more scholars to pick up that cremation baton. Now there's a baton. These I don't know what's going on with my interviewing technique today, but anyway, it's all gone crazy.
But I agree. I think I think excuse me, part of it is that the analyzing cremated bone is challenging. It's time consuming. It's just there are many osteologists that really don't like analysing cremated bone because it is so time consuming, and it's quite difficult. And I think if there's more training embedded in bioarchaeology courses or osteoarchaeology courses, it might encourage students to pursue research, focusing on cremation. So when I was doing my master's, I think I had a couple of days that focused in the lab focusing on cremation before I moved on to my project. So it was a huge jump, and it was really difficult for me. So I think more training. So personally, I would like to see modules on cremation and a module on ethics. I think that would be a nice course, but it's just me.
I think you just have to do this. Who needs to listen to line managers and student numbers? Just say, tomorrow, next year, next academic year, I will be teaching this and nothing else. Line manager, they'll go, yes, Dr. Squires. And then you're like, that's the way it works, isn't it? That's what university is about: freedom to pursue our. If only. But it's going to happen one day. I'd love to do a whole module on cremation, actually. Burning issues, past and present, and it would be, be good. I can imagine if I had a budget, if my line manager's watching this and decides to give me money to get extra special guest lecturers to come in, I could do this huge sort of digital course, on cremation. Who would take it? Everyone should take it. It should be mandatory for the whole university. It's fantastic. So it's such an interesting area of research, and I'm not, as you know, I'm not on the bioarch side, but I really wish I had those skills behind me, because I'm such an awe of what you've been able to achieve with your past work, and I'm looking forward to all the things you're going to be doing moving forward, Kirsty. And is there any final things you want viewers to know about the book or your work before we wrap up?
I think just have a read of the book, and just read more about ethics. Just self-reflect on ethical practice and how you practice, and just collaborate, and to make sure that the field that we work in is as ethical as it can be. And yeah, that's it, I think. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Kirsty, and this will be going out very soon, and I think everyone will learn something from this, and hopefully, as I said, the book is going to be on all good websites and all good university libraries, and it's certainly one that if you're thinking of going into anything to do with funerary archaeology, you need to be dipping into, because it's going to be, I think it's going to be a real. Oh, there it is. It's going in and out of the backdrop thing. Yeah, there it is. Hey! But the point is, it's been great to talk to you, and I think this is going to be hopefully one of a series of interviews where I can talk to people and I can learn stuff about their latest work, and viewers can join on the journey. So thank you, Kirsty.
Thank you so much for inviting me. Lovely to talk to you.
If you've enjoyed this Archaeodeath video, why not check out the Archaeodeath blog at howardwilliamsblog.wordpress.com.